4 lepers in the Syrian camp. I do like this story. Many things about it that just shows the power of God and how He works with ungodly kings. Both sides of, both armies here are ruled by ungodly kings. And right in the middle of it, there's Elisha with his ministry in this wicked nation. The Syrian king, this is a man by the name of Ben-hadad. Ben-hadad is the same king that sent Naaman to be healed of leprosy. He's the same one that had the blind soldiers that was treated well. And it said for a long time he wouldn't invade Israel. Now he's back again with the whole thing about the 4 lepers. Interesting that Elijah, it was the one who anointed Ben-hadad's father to be king. And now this is his son, and Elisha is actually the one dealing with him. And so in many ways, Elisha seems to be very compassionate towards this king. Fights against him, but still there seems to be a relationship. And when we get into the next story, we're going to see how that he was free to go from this country to that country, that he went into Syria freely. Well, there's a few things about this famine. First of all, about 2 pounds of silver for a donkey's head. That's an incredible price when you figure that is unclean meat. Well, not that Israel was probably worried about the dietary law. They were an ungodly nation at this time, but still, that is a very high. That's a very high amount of money. But the 2 ounces of silver for the dove's droppings. Now that may not be as bad as it sounds. This phrase, dove droppings or dove dung, this is the only time that appears in the Bible. But it is used in history, not referring to literally dove droppings, but it refers, in history, refers to a type of vegetable, kind of like peas, very coarse, which was eaten by the very poor. Personally, I think it was dove droppings, but it could actually be this form of vegetables that no one would buy. No one actually charges for those things. They're just the very poor would eat it. But here they're actually getting 2 ounces of silver for it. If you can understand about dove droppings, it's like in future generations, they may look back at us and think that we actually take dogs and heat them up and eat them. Which would seem strange to them, but to us who eat hot dogs, we don't think a thing of it. So it is here. The eating of the children and not sharing. Interesting. This is actually a curse that goes back to Deuteronomy chapter 28, where God says, "You depart from me, you become a wicked nation. Armies will come and surround you and cut off supplies, and you will eat your children." It's interesting that in Deuteronomy, just like in this right here, it not only talks about the eating of the children, but not sharing. It said, gentle fathers that love their children will not share. Will not share. He will eat the child and not share with his wife, or a wife will eat the children and not share them with anyone else. And of course, in this story right here, that's both of those things are true: the eating of the children and not sharing. The 4 lepers. Now, there's a Jewish tradition that I hold to, that these 4 lepers were Gehazi, the former servant of Elisha, and his 3 sons. Now, I'm not sure about the 3 sons, but I think could be pretty good evidence that it might have been Gehazi, because in the very next story, you see the king of Israel talking with Gehazi, which you may wonder why he'd be talking with a leper. Well, if he was one of the lepers who actually saved the city, the king may be treating him well. And of course, we're going to deal with that next week. We're going to deal with this relationship here between the king and Gehazi. I believe it comes back to this story here, where he was one of the lepers. It would make sense. The king's advisor, I have sympathy for him. He could not think outside the box. It's impossible. God cannot fulfill that promise. Even if he opens up the windows of heaven, to him the only way to get that food is open up the windows of heaven and have it pour down. And he just said that it's not possible to get enough food down here to fulfill that promise by tomorrow. I think that if the prophet would have sat down with the advisor and said, well, what if the Syrian army during the night just suddenly left and left all their supplies behind? Oh, well, yeah, I guess if that happened, it'd be possible. That's like me. Sometimes when God makes promises, I think, how is that possible? And then when they're fulfilled, I say, oh, well, yeah, I guess if that's what's going to happen, of course. Well, I have sympathy for him. Come back next week. When we go into that next story, the one I talked about, there's a lot of insights about that story I think you will enjoy. Come back next week.